My parents drained my $14,000 savings until the police showed up at their door. It wasn't just the money, it was the way it happened, the cold, calculated silence that followed that turned my insides to ice. For years, I'd worked myself to the bone. Every late night, every weekend spent hunched over spreadsheets in that cramped little office, all building towards something, towards security, towards proving them wrong. My parents. They always thought I was the dreamer, the one who'd never quite catch up to my older brother, David, the golden child, the one destined for the family business, for the big house on the lake, for the easy life. And I was okay with that for a long time. I was happy to be the quiet one, the one who found her own way. I was building my own empire, brick by painstaking brick, and that $140,000 in my savings account, the one I'd meticulously cultivated from my freelance graphic design work, from side gigs, from every penny I could squirrel away, felt like a monument to my independence. It was my safety net, my future, my proof that I didn't need them, didn't need David, didn't need the legacy they'd so carefully constructed for their heir. I envisioned buying a small condo in the city, something sleek and modern, a place that screamed me. Or maybe investing it, letting it grow, a quiet rebellion against their old money hand-me-down ways. The Thanksgiving before it all imploded was a masterclass in passive aggression. David was there, of course, holding court at the head of the table, regaling everyone with tales of his latest business triumph, punctuated by my father's booming laughter and my mother's adoring, almost vacant smile. I sat there, a silent observer, picking at my green bean casserole, feeling the familiar ache of being on the outside looking in. My father, a man who measured success in quarterly reports and the size of his golf swing, cleared his throat. His gaze finally landed on me. "So, Anya," he began, the polite inquiry laced with a subtle condescension I'd heard 1,000 times. "Still designing things?" A movement of his lips that didn't escape my notice. My mother, ever the diplomat, jumped in. "Your father just means, darling, that we're all very proud of David's tangible contributions. The business is doing so well." Tangible. As if my work, the logos I'd created for startups, the websites I'd built for local businesses, the brand identities I'd painstakingly crafted, wasn't real, wasn't valuable. I forced a smile, a tight, brittle thing. "It's going well, Mom," I said, my voice deliberately even. "Very well." Later that evening, after David and his wife had departed in their gleaming SUV and the silence of the sprawling house had settled in, my parents cornered me in the living room. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the oil paintings that adorned the walls, portraits of stern ancestors who probably wouldn't have recognized our modern lives. My mother poured me a glass of Chardonnay, her hand trembling slightly. My father sat in his leather armchair, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by a somber, almost weary expression. "Anya," he started, his voice softer than usual, "we need to talk about your future." My stomach tightened. This was it. The familiar script of their well-intentioned but suffocating advice was about to begin. David's expansion plans for the resort are ambitious, my father continued, his gaze fixed on the fire. He needs capital, significant capital. I didn't say anything. I just waited. "The market is volatile right now," my mother added, her eyes wide and pleading. "We don't want to borrow from just anyone. We want to keep things within the family." The implication hung heavy in the air, thick and cloying. They were asking me for my savings, my hard-earned, independent savings. "You want my $140,000? I asked, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. It wasn't a question, not really. It was a statement of disbelief, of dawning horror. My father sighed, a deep, resigned sound. "It's an investment, Anya, a bridge loan. David will repay it, of course, with interest. We'll put it in writing." He reached for a folder on the side table, a thick manila envelope that seemed to radiate an aura of impending doom. My mother wrung her hands. We hate to see you struggling, darling. This is an opportunity to be a part of something big, something secure." Secure. The word felt like a mockery. My $140,000 was my security. The thought of it being swallowed by David's grandiose plans, by my father's blind faith in his son, made me feel physically ill. I need that money, I said, my voice barely a whisper. For my condo, for my future. My father's face hardened. Anya, this is family. This is about supporting your brother, about strengthening our family's financial position. A condo can wait. This is an immediate need. The unspoken threat, the familiar power dynamic, was laid bare. If I didn't comply, I would be the selfish daughter, the one who put her own wants above family duty, the one who wasn't truly part of their world. The argument that followed was a blur of accusations and justifications, a tempest of familial obligation and personal betrayal. My father's voice boomed, his patience wearing thin. My mother wept, pleading for unity, for me to see the bigger picture. I stood my ground, my heart pounding, my hands clenched into fists. I refused. I absolutely refused to hand over the fruits of my labor, the symbol of my hard-won autonomy, to fund David's latest ego trip. I left their house that night in tears, the taste of Chardonnay soured by the bitter residue of their disappointment. I drove home to my tiny apartment, the city lights a cold comfort, and spent the next few days in a haze of anger and hurt. I texted them, I called them, I tried to reason with them, but my messages went unanswered. The silence was deafening. It was a deliberate, calculated silence, a form of punishment. A week later, I decided to transfer a significant chunk of my savings to a different, more secure account, just to feel like I still had some control. I logged into my online banking, my fingers flying across the keyboard, and then I saw it. The number. It wasn't $140,000. It wasn't even close. My breath hitched. My account was depleted. Every single dollar. Gone. It was like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. I scrolled through the transaction history, my eyes blurring, searching for a mistake, for a glitch, for anything that would explain this catastrophic loss. There were multiple transfers, large sums, all siphoned out in the span of a few hours, all to an account I didn't recognize.
My mind raced, a frantic hamster on a wheel, trying to process the impossible. It couldn't be. They wouldn't. Not after I'd refused. Not after the argument. I called my bank, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. The customer service representative was polite, professional, but ultimately unhelpful. They needed verification, they said. It would take time. Time I didn't have. Panic began to set in, a cold, creeping dread that settled deep in my bones. I thought about my parents, about their desperation, about David's insatiable need for more. Could they have? No, it was too extreme, too illegal. Then, a chilling thought. What if they'd found a way to access my accounts without my explicit consent? What if they'd used some leverage, some old passwords, some loophole I wasn't aware of? The idea was horrifying, a violation of trust on a level I hadn't even considered. I sat there, numb, staring at the empty digital space where my future had resided. The humiliation of being excluded from their family gatherings was nothing compared to this. This was a complete erasure. It was a theft, not just of money, but of my hard work, my ambition, my very sense of self-reliance. I felt so exposed, so vulnerable. The independence I'd so fiercely guarded had been stripped away in an instant by the very people who were supposed to love and protect me. I replayed the conversation, my father's hard expression, my mother's pleading eyes, David's smug indifference. It all clicked into place with a sickening finality. They hadn't just asked for a loan. They had taken what they believed was rightfully theirs, what they probably felt I owed them. I didn't know what to do. The legal ramifications of reporting my own parents were immense, the emotional fallout unthinkable. But the alternative, letting this stand, letting them get away with it, was even more unbearable. I felt a flicker of something new, something hard and cold, beginning to take root in the fertile ground of my anger and despair. It wasn't just about getting my money back anymore. It was about something far more primal. It was about making them understand the depth of what they had done. And then, as if summoned by my burgeoning rage, the doorbell rang. It was late, too late for social calls. My heart leaped into my throat. Who could it be? I peered through the peephole, my hand trembling. 2 uniformed officers stood on my doorstep, their faces grim. My blood ran cold. This couldn't be happening. Not now, not like this. I slowly reached for the doorknob, my mind reeling, bracing myself for whatever was about to unfold, a knot of dread tightening in my chest.
The last thing I expected, the very last thing on earth I thought could happen, was that the police would show up at their door because of what they'd done to me. But as I opened my door, a chilling certainty washed over me. My life, and theirs, was about to change in ways I could never have predicted. This was no longer just about $140,000. This was about power, and I was just beginning to realize that I had more of it than they ever imagined. The uniform was stiff, the badges glinting under the hallway light. Officer Ramirez, a woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper ponytail, held up a badge. Officer Davies, younger, looked earnest, clutching a notepad like a shield. They stood on my threshold, a stark tableau against the mundane beige of my apartment building's corridor.
I'd called them shaking after I realized the money was gone. I'd sputtered out a story about financial fraud, about unauthorized access, about my parents. It felt surreal, like I was reciting lines from a movie I'd never auditioned for. They'd listened patiently, taken notes, and asked for details. Then, the kicker. They needed to speak to the individuals involved. My parents and my brother. I'd given them the address, my childhood home, the place I'd fled from just days before. The drive to their house was a blur of anxiety. I sat in the back of the patrol car, the scent of stale coffee and disinfectant filling the air, a stark contrast to the manicured lawns and expensive cars that lined their street. Each familiar landmark, the oak tree where I'd scraped my knee learning to ride my bike, the sprawling rose bushes my mother doted on, seemed to mock me, a reminder of a life that felt increasingly distant, tainted by this bitter reality. The house itself, a grand colonial with a freshly painted navy blue door, looked serene, untouched by the storm brewing within. As we pulled up the long, winding driveway, the front door swung open. My father, impeccably dressed in a cashmere sweater, stood there, a forced smile plastered on his face. My mother, in her usual elegant loungewear, appeared beside him, her expression a mixture of confusion and apprehension. David, looking every bit the successful businessman in a tailored suit, emerged from the living room, a subtle smirk playing on his lips, as if this was some absurd yet entertaining family drama he was observing from the wings. "Anya, what on earth is this?" My father's voice, usually booming with authority, was laced with a strained politeness. He gestured to the officers, his eyes flicking between them and me. Officer Ramirez stepped forward, her demeanor professional and unwavering. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, we're here regarding a report of financial fraud filed by your daughter, Anya Sterling." The forced smile vanished from my father's face, replaced by a mask of bewildered indignation. "Fraud? What are you talking about? Anya, what is this?" My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Fraud? But we would never." David chuckled, a low, dry sound that grated on my nerves. "Having a bit of a tiff, are we, Anya? Decided to escalate things to the police? Really dramatic." Officer Davies consulted his notepad. "Miss Sterling has reported that a sum of approximately $140,000 has been transferred from her personal savings account without her authorization. The transfers appear to have originated from an IP address associated with this residence." The air in the driveway crackled with tension. My father's face contorted, a mixture of anger and disbelief. "That's preposterous. Anya, you know we wouldn't do something like that. This must be a mistake." "A mistake?" I finally found my voice, the words coming out colder than I intended. "The money is gone, Dad. All of it. And the transfers were made from your home, your computers, your network." My mother's eyes welled up. "Oh, Anya, darling, how could you even think such a thing? We love you. We would never hurt you." "Then explain it," I challenged, my gaze fixed on my father. "Explain how my savings disappeared the week after I refused to give you the money for David's resort project." My father bristled, his face flushing. "This is an outrageous accusation. We are pillars of this community."
"We have a reputation to uphold." "And that reputation is built on what?" I shot back, my voice rising. "On taking what you want, when you want it? On crushing anyone who stands in your way? David needed the money, so you took it. It's that simple, isn't it?" David stepped forward, his usual swagger tinged with an unfamiliar sharpness. "Careful, Anya. You're making some serious accusations. You have proof of this?" Officer Ramirez cleared her throat. "We have preliminary evidence suggesting the transfers originated from this location. We will need to conduct a more thorough investigation, which may include access to your financial records and electronic devices." My father paled. "This is an invasion of privacy. You can't just barge in here and accuse us of criminal activity." "We have a warrant based on probable cause, sir," Officer Davies stated calmly. holding up a folded document. The carefully constructed facade of my parents' perfect life began to crumble. My mother let out a sob, sinking onto the porch steps. My father stood rigid, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning holes through me. David, for the first time, looked genuinely unnerved, his smirk replaced by a tight, unreadable expression. The officers entered the house, their presence a stark intrusion into the opulent, suffocating space I'd grown up in. I followed, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. This was it, the moment of reckoning. The years of feeling invisible, of being the lesser child, the one who wasn't quite good enough, had culminated in this. They had stolen my future, and now the law was here to witness the fallout. The investigation was a slow, agonizing process. My parents were questioned separately, their initial indignant outrage gradually morphing into a more defensive, evasive posture. David, surprisingly, was the most cooperative, his initial cockiness replaced by a quiet, almost sullen compliance. He claimed ignorance, stated he wasn't involved in Anya's finances, and repeatedly emphasized his own success, as if to distance himself from whatever mess his parents had created. It was a performance, I knew, but one that served his narrative. As the officers meticulously combed through bank statements, computer logs, and phone records, a new, more damning picture began to emerge. It wasn't just a matter of my parents impulsively raiding my account. There was a calculated pattern, a deliberate manipulation that went deeper than I'd imagined. They hadn't just taken the money, they had systematically drained my accounts over several weeks, using a series of offshore shell corporations and intermediaries to mask the transfers. It was sophisticated, professional even, the kind of financial maneuvering you see in movies, not something I'd associate with my seemingly ordinary, albeit wealthy parents. The initial report suggested a direct transfer, but the deeper dive revealed a much more intricate web. It turned out my parents, through a series of complex transactions involving a shadowy investment firm I'd never heard of, had essentially laundered my savings. They'd moved the money through multiple accounts, different jurisdictions, creating a paper trail designed to be untraceable. The shell companies were registered in tax havens, their directors listed as anonymous nominees. It was a level of financial chicanery that frankly blew my mind.
They didn't just need the money for David's project, Officer Ramirez explained to me one afternoon, her voice hushed, as we sat in a sterile interview room at the precinct. This was about more than a bridge loan. This was about creating liquidity for some other ventures they were involved in, ventures that were apparently in trouble. Trouble? What kind of trouble? I asked, my stomach clenching. She hesitated, then said, "Let's just say they were leveraged heavily, and they needed significant capital, fast. Your savings, Anya, were a convenient, readily available source, and their method of acquiring it, it's not new, but it's certainly elaborate." It hit me then, with a force that knocked the wind out of me. It wasn't just about greed, it was about desperation. My parents, the formidable, seemingly unflustered Sterling couple, were in financial distress, and they had used me, their own daughter, as their lifeline, without a second thought. The humiliation of their rejection was nothing compared to this cold, hard realization. They didn't just see me as the lesser child, they saw me as a resource to be exploited. The investigation turned a corner. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the anonymous directors, it all pointed to a level of planning and deceit that went beyond mere familial desperation. My father, a man who prided himself on his business acumen, had apparently been dabbling in something far riskier, far more illicit than a resort expansion. The police suspected a sophisticated money laundering operation, and my $140,000 was just one small part of a much larger and potentially illegal financial scheme. The detective started asking me about any unusual communications from my parents, any cryptic remarks, anything that might hint at their financial situation. I racked my brain, replaying every conversation, every holiday gathering. Nothing concrete, just the usual veiled criticisms, the subtle digs about my career path, the constant comparisons to David. But now, those remarks felt different. They weren't just passive aggression. They were the subtle deflections of people trying to hide something massive. Then came the breakthrough. While reviewing my parents' financial records, the investigators stumbled upon a hidden account, a brokerage account I had no knowledge of. This account held a significant portfolio of stocks, but what was more telling were the transactions. Large sums were being moved in and out regularly, and the pattern suggested a series of high-risk, high-reward trades. The account was linked to a series of offshore entities, the very same ones used to launder my money. "This is it, Anya," Detective Miller said, his voice grave as he showed me printouts of complex trading logs. "Your parents weren't just investing. They were gambling, big time, and they were losing, badly.
This brokerage account, it's where a lot of the money they siphoned from you ended up. They were trying to recoup their losses, or worse, fund further risky investments. It was a betrayal on a seismic level. My parents, the custodians of tradition and stability, were involved in a desperate, high-stakes financial gamble, and they had used my life savings as their personal stake. The carefully constructed image of their respectable lives shattered completely. They were not just flawed, they were reckless and deceitful. The impact on the family was immediate and devastating.
My father, confronted with the irrefutable evidence of his financial malfeasance and the legal ramifications it entailed, finally broke. He confessed, not to me, but to the detectives, admitting to orchestrating the transfers of my savings and using them to cover significant trading losses and to keep his dubious financial dealings afloat. He admitted to setting up the complex network of shell corporations, a feat that surprised even the seasoned investigators. He claimed it was a desperate attempt to maintain their lifestyle, a lifestyle that, he grudgingly admitted, was built on a foundation more precarious than anyone knew. My mother, initially portrayed as a pawn in her husband's schemes, was revealed to be more complicit than she let on. While not the architect, she had actively participated in the cover-up, facilitating transfers, signing documents, and consistently defending her husband's actions to anyone who would listen, including me. Her tears now seemed less about genuine remorse and more about the potential consequences for her own comfortable existence. David, predictably, tried to distance himself from the entire affair. He maintained his innocence, his lawyers working overtime to ensure he wasn't implicated. But the whispers, the knowing glances exchanged among my parents' social circle, told a different story. His success was inextricably linked to their family's wealth, a wealth now revealed to be partially built on illicit dealings and, in my case, outright theft. The confrontation, when it finally came, wasn't a shouting match in the grand foyer. It was a cold, quiet meeting in a neutral space, a lawyer's office. My parents, looking diminished and aged, sat across from me. David was absent. His legal team had advised him to stay away. My father, his voice a shadow of its former booming self, offered a perfunctory apology. My mother cried, a silent stream of tears that felt more performative than genuine. "I want my money back," I said, my voice steady, devoid of the emotion that had fueled me for weeks. All of it, with interest, and the legal costs incurred by my investigation. My father nodded, his gaze fixed on the polished mahogany desk. We will make arrangements. It will take time." "Time is something you have in abundance now, Dad," I replied, a chilling calm settling over me. The rage had receded, replaced by a hard, clear resolve. They had taken everything from me, my savings, my trust, my sense of security. But in doing so, they had inadvertently given me something far more valuable, an unshakable understanding of my own strength and a clarity about who they truly were. The legal proceedings were messy, protracted, and deeply unpleasant. There were settlements, asset freezes, and endless rounds of negotiations. My parents' reputation, the very thing my father had so fiercely protected, was in tatters. Their friends whispered, their social standing plummeted, and the opulent estate that had always felt like a fortress now felt like a gilded cage. I didn't see them much after that. The estrangement was a chasm, not a rift. David sent a brief, impersonal text message once, a generic holiday greeting that felt like a final, hollow gesture of family connection. The money, eventually, began to trickle back. Not all of it, not immediately, but enough to signify a legal victory. But the financial recovery was secondary. The real victory was in the shift of power.
I'd started this journey as the overlooked daughter, the dreamer, the one who wasn't cut out for the real world. They had underestimated me, dismissed my ambition, and ultimately tried to break me. But they had miscalculated. They had sown the seeds of their own destruction through their greed and recklessness, and I, the daughter they had tried to silence, was the one holding the ledger. The last time I saw them, it was at a carefully orchestrated legal meeting. My father looked like a ghost of the man he once was, his eyes hollow, his shoulders permanently slumped. My mother, her face etched with lines that hadn't been there before, clutched her designer handbag, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the leather. They were stripped of their wealth, their status, and most importantly, their illusion of control. They were no longer the formidable matriarch and patriarch. They were two elderly people facing the consequences of a lifetime of entitlement and poor choices. As I stood up to leave, the sterile air of the conference room heavy with unspoken resentments, my mother's voice, thin and reedy, stopped me. "Anya, will you ever..."
She couldn't finish the sentence. I turned, a quiet, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. The anger was gone. The hurt had dulled. What remained was something far more potent, a cold, unshakable understanding of the leverage I now held. You made your choices, I said, my voice resonating with a newfound authority they had never expected. And I am simply making mine. Consider this a long overdue accounting. I walked out, leaving them in the silence of their own making. The sun felt warm on my face, a stark contrast to the chill that had permeated my life for so long. I had lost money, yes, but I had gained something infinitely more precious. I had found my voice. I had reclaimed my power. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that the Sterling family legacy, as they knew it, was over. The true Sterling heir, the one they had never accounted for, had finally arrived. And the final reckoning, for all of them, was still to come. The carefully constructed facade had crumbled, revealing the rot beneath. They had gambled everything, and in the end, they had lost it all. But the game wasn't quite over. Not for me. The thrill of seeing their empire, built on lies and exploitation, brought to its knees, was intoxicating. And as I drove away, the city lights blurring into streaks of color, I felt a sense of profound, chilling satisfaction. The fight had been brutal, but the victory, I knew, was absolute. The foundation of their power, their wealth, their carefully curated image, had been exposed as a sham. And I was the one who had held the X-ray machine. They thought they had taken my money. They were wrong. They had simply funded my rise to power. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a delicious, dangerous precursor to what was next. The Sterling Empire was about to face its true reckoning, and I was holding the gavel. The sheer audacity of it, the cold, calculating precision that had gone into stripping me bare, it was almost impressive. Almost. But there was no admiration left in me, only a hollow ache where trust used to reside, and a nascent fire that was starting to burn away the remnants of my shock. They thought they had broken me. They thought that by taking my savings, by forcing me into this corner, they had won.
They'd underestimated the resilience that came from being overlooked, the quiet strength forged in the fires of constant dismissal. I'd spent years being the invisible Sterling, the one who didn't quite fit the mold, the one whose quiet ambition was mistaken for meekness. Now, that meekness was a cloak, and beneath it, something far more dangerous was stirring. The legal battles were a brutal education. My parents, once titans of their social circle, were now pariahs. Their carefully crafted reputation, the bedrock of their influence, had crumbled like a sandcastle at high tide. Whispers followed them, veiled inquiries about their financial difficulties, thinly disguised schadenfreude from those who had always resented their effortless superiority. The estate, that sprawling monument to their success, became a gilded cage. Every room, every antique, every meticulously curated piece of art was a reminder of the wealth they had so recklessly jeopardized. My father, the man who'd always held himself with such unshakable authority, was a shell of his former self. The lines on his face seemed deeper, etched not just by age, but by a profound, soul-deep weariness. His booming voice was a memory, replaced by a hesitant murmur. My mother, her flawless facade cracking under the strain, flitted around the house like a ghost, her days filled with frantic phone calls to lawyers and hushed conversations with her dwindling circle of confidants. David, of course, had maintained a calculated distance, his lawyers ensuring he was as far removed from the scandal as possible. His brief, impersonal text message on my birthday, a sterile, "Happy birthday, Anya," felt like a final, chilling pronouncement that our family ties had been severed, leaving only the sterile, transactional remnants. The money, it came back, not all at once, not in a triumphant surge, but in a slow, agonizing trickle. Each payment, each restitution was a small victory, a concrete symbol of their capitulation. But the financial recovery, while satisfying, was secondary. The true win was the shift in power, the undeniable reversal of roles. They had tried to erase me, to steal my future, to silence me with their arrogance and their greed. Instead, they had inadvertently forged me. They had shown me the true nature of their power, a power built on manipulation, on debt, on the exploitation of those they deemed weaker. And in doing so, they had revealed their own vulnerability.
The final legal meeting was in a neutral, sterile conference room. The air was thick with unspoken recriminations, the weight of years of familial discord pressing down on us. My father sat opposite me, his gaze fixed on the polished mahogany of the table, a man drowning in the wreckage of his own making. My mother, her perfectly coiffed hair now seeming a little askew, clutched her expensive handbag like a lifeline, her manicured nails digging into the soft leather. They looked smaller, diminished, stripped of the aura of invincibility they had worn like a second skin for so long. I stood to leave, the icy calm that had settled over me for weeks now giving way to a profound, chilling sense of finality. My mother's voice, thin and reedy, cut through the silence. "Anya, will you ever?" She couldn't finish the question. Her eyes, once so sharp and critical, now held a flicker of something akin to fear, or perhaps just a dawning realization of the abyss that separated us.
I turned, the hint of a smile playing on my lips, a smile that held no warmth, only the cold certainty of a game played and won. "You made your choices," I said, my voice steady, resonating with an authority they had never seen in me before, an authority they had never expected. "And I am simply making mine. Consider this a long overdue accounting." I walked out, leaving them in the suffocating silence of their own self-inflicted downfall. The sun felt warm on my face as I stepped outside, a stark contrast to the chill that had permeated my life for what felt like an eternity. I had lost money, yes, a significant sum that represented years of hard work and sacrifice, but I had gained something far more precious. I had found my voice, the one they had always tried to drown out. I had reclaimed my power, the power they had so carelessly tried to steal. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that the Sterling family legacy, the one they had so meticulously constructed, was over. The true Sterling heir, the one they had never accounted for, the one they had consistently underestimated, had finally arrived. And the final reckoning, for all of them, was still to come. Their empire, built on lies and exploitation, had been brought to its knees, and the intoxicating thrill of witnessing its collapse was a potent, addictive elixir. The drive away was a blur. City lights streamed past, streaks of color against the deepening twilight. The satisfaction wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, a brutal, unvarnished kind of justice. They had gambled everything, believing their wealth and their position would shield them from any consequence. They were wrong. They had underestimated the quiet determination of the overlooked daughter. They thought they had taken my money. They were wrong. They had, in their arrogance, simply funded my rise to power. The thought sent a delicious shiver down my spine, a potent, dangerous precursor to what was next. The Sterling Empire was about to face its true reckoning, and I was the one holding the gavel. The meticulous planning, the years of simmering resentment, the quiet observation of their flaws and their fears, it had all culminated in this moment. I had watched them, studied them, waited for the opportune moment to strike, and they had handed it to me on a silver platter of their own hubris. They believed their financial acumen, their ability to manipulate markets and people, was untouchable. They didn't realize that true power wasn't in accumulating wealth, but in understanding its fragility, in recognizing the cracks in the foundation, and in knowing how to exploit them. My parents' downfall wasn't a sudden, explosive event. It was a slow, agonizing unraveling, a systematic dismantling of everything they held dear. Their social standing evaporated like mist in the morning sun. The invitations stopped coming. The hushed conversations turned into outright whispers, and the once adoring eyes of their peers now held a mixture of pity and veiled amusement. The estate, once a symbol of their unassailable success, became a monument to their spectacular failure. The expensive cars sat gathering dust in the garage. The pristine lawns began to look a little less manicured, and the grand rooms echoed with a silence that was deafening. David, in his calculated self-preservation, had already begun to distance himself, quietly divesting from any shared assets, ensuring his own financial future was secure, untainted by the Sterling scandal. His brief text message had been a warning, a clear signal that he was cutting ties, severing the umbilical cord that had bound him to their fortunes. He was a survivor, a pragmatist, and in the Sterling family, pragmatism often trumped sentimentality. He would rebuild, of course, perhaps with a different name, a different story,
but the stain of his family's disgrace would forever be a shadow he'd have to outrun. The legal proceedings were a masterclass in controlled demolition. Every asset, every account, every shell corporation was meticulously scrutinized. My legal team, comprised of the sharpest minds money could buy, my money now, finally, worked with ruthless efficiency. We didn't just seek restitution, we sought to dismantle their empire, brick by brick. They had used their wealth to control and manipulate, and now their wealth was being used to hold them accountable. My father's confession was the turning point. The dam of his denial finally broke, releasing a torrent of admission that confirmed everything. He admitted to the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the systematic siphoning of my savings. He spoke of a desperate attempt to maintain a lifestyle that was built on a foundation more precarious than anyone knew, a lifestyle funded by risky investments and increasingly desperate measures. His voice, when he spoke of his fear of ruin, was a hollow echo of the man who had once commanded boardrooms with an iron fist. My mother, too, was implicated. While not the architect of the financial schemes, her complicity in the cover-up was undeniable. She had facilitated transfers, signed documents, and consistently defended her husband's actions, even to me, her own daughter. Her tears, which had once seemed like genuine expressions of maternal concern, now felt like calculated performances designed to elicit sympathy and avoid consequence. The turning point wasn't just the legal victories, the monetary settlements. It was in the quiet moments of realization, the dawning understanding in their eyes that their reign was over. I saw it when my father, his shoulders permanently slumped, handed over the keys to a prized antique car, a symbol of his past wealth, without a word. I saw it when my mother, her face a mask of carefully controlled despair, was forced to sell off a collection of rare jewels, each stone a reminder of a life she was rapidly losing. The confrontation wasn't a dramatic explosion of anger or a tearful reconciliation. It was a slow, deliberate severing of ties. It was the final, cold notification of asset liquidation, the confirmation of legal judgments against them. It was the understanding that the family name, once synonymous with power and prestige, was now tainted, a brand to be avoided. As I drove away from that final legal meeting, the sterile air of the conference room still clinging to me, I felt a sense of profound, chilling satisfaction. It wasn't just about the money, though that was crucial. It was about reclaiming my narrative, about rewriting the ending they had so confidently penned for me. They had seen me as a pawn, a resource to be exploited. They had failed to recognize the quiet strength, the unwavering resolve that lay beneath the surface.
The Sterling Empire, as they knew it, was no more. It had been built on a foundation of entitlement, greed, and a profound disregard for the very people who had helped build it. And now, it was collapsing under its own weight. The game, for them, was over. For me, it was just beginning. The silence that now hung over their lives was the silence of consequence, and in that silence, I heard the echo of my own triumph. They had underestimated me. They had tried to break me, but they had only succeeded in forging me into something stronger, something more determined. The Sterling legacy, as they understood it, was dead, but a new one built on truth and resilience, was just beginning, and I was the one writing its first chapter. The emotional scars would remain, a testament to the betrayal, but they were no longer wounds. They were badges of honor, a reminder of the battle I had fought and won. The world outside the conference room beckoned, bright and full of promise, a world where my own narrative, unwritten by the ghosts of their ambition, was finally mine to command. The final exhale was one of liberation, of a burden finally shed, of a future unburdened by their shadows.